Thank you for joining. We're going to get started in just a few short minutes here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And if anybody else joins us, we'll loop them into the conversation. So, hi, everybody. My name is Quincy Wansell. I'm the Assistant Manager of Youth Programs here at Alice Paul Center for Gender Justice. And I thank you for joining us today for our virtual series, Champions of Equality. So, this series features conversations with activists, academics, and educators on people from the past and present who have made an impact on the fight for gender equality. So before we begin, I'd like to invite you all to join me for our land acknowledgement, and this is specific to Burlington County. The land upon which we gather is part of the traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape, known as Lenape-Hoking. The Lenape people lived in harmony with one another upon this territory for thousands of years. During the colonial era and early federal period, many were removed west and north, but some also remain among the continuing historical tribal communities of the region: the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nation, the Ramapo Lenape Nation, and the Powhatan Lenape Tribe, the Nanticoke Millsboro, Delaware, and the Lenape of Cheswold, Delaware. We acknowledge the Lenni Lenape as the original people of this land and their continuing relationship with their territory. In our acknowledgement of the continued presence of Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm their aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanend that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun and moon and stars shine. So before I introduce our guests today, I just want to remind everyone that we invite you to share your questions during the Q&A portion of our program. And we are dedicated to making all of our spaces, virtual and otherwise, safe and inclusive for everybody. So harassment of any kind will not be tolerated in verbal or written comments during APC programs. If anyone chooses to engage in racist, sexist, trans, or homophobic speech or any other kind of harassment of bullying behavior, they will be removed from the program without further warning. Thank you for being a part of our community and for partnering with us to make sure we remain dedicated to equality for all in a word and in deed. So today I am joined by Sharon Rollins from the New Jersey State Library. As the Youth Services Specialist at the New Jersey State Library since 2007, Sharon Rollins coordinates the statewide summer reading program and provides services, resources, and training for youth service staff in New Jersey libraries. Rollins is on the New Jersey Association of School Librarians Executive Board as the State Library Liaison and serves as Vice Chair of the New Jersey Center for the Book. She has chaired the American Library Association's YALSA Award for Excellence in Nonfiction Committee and served on the Michael L. Prince and Margaret A. Edwards Award Committees, as well as other ALA book selection committees. When not reading books for children or teens or book reviewing for SLIM book list, she loves to cook, watch old movies, and go for long walks. In 2019, NJLA honored her with the Librarian of the Year Award. Rollins received a master's in library science degree from Rutgers University. Thank you for joining me today. And with that, I will turn it over to Sharon Rollins. Thank you.
Hi, Quincy. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I do realize that this is the dinner hour, so I can't see you all, so I assume that you're hopefully either getting ready for dinner or, doing what you need to do and just listening in, which is fine. I did want to start by saying, before I start my slideshow, that there are a number of reasons why I chose to speak this month. One is because, in those of you who go to libraries, you may know that September is always a National Library Card Sign-up Month. So I'm always advocating for everyone to get a library card. And the other reason is, or one of the other reasons is, this is also September 15th started Hispanic Heritage Month. So I want to be very inclusive to uh, anyone who's Spanish speaking or speaks any languages from anyone from those countries. Um, and I think I will now start sharing my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see that.
Yeah, we see it.
When I first started thinking about this presentation, I was going to just do it on people of color, mostly who and mostly Black, or as they were probably called, African Americans, or probably even people who are colored, really. That's the term probably was used way back, before the Civil Rights Act was enacted. But I think I've been a librarian for, gosh, I think. Well, haven't had my degree for 40 years, but I've been working in libraries. Next year will be 40 years. And when I did go to library school, there were certain things that we were either never taught or we didn't talk about, or it just, I don't remember it coming up. It's probably something that different library schools may mention, but I honestly don't remember getting the history of how public libraries were not always welcoming to those who were BIPOC. And I don't think children today, and I don't even think a lot of adults today even realize that libraries, um, they didn't allow everyone in way back before the 60s. They had the whole separate but equal laws in effect where if you were Black, you either had to go around back to the library and go in the back door, and there was only like a certain room that you could use, or you could only go into the library in certain hours when other people weren't there. So the whole idea of libraries welcoming everyone is not necessarily something that has been true since libraries existed. Um, so I was thinking, well, let me think about some women women librarians, women educators, women who love libraries, who love books, who work to make that change. And so I've come up with a few people that I thought I would profile. And these are the ones I'm profiling. This is not necessarily everyone. As a matter of fact, Anne Carroll Moore um, is someone who uh, I guess she was born in around trying to remember 1970 something. So by the time she was working in libraries, um, there had been other people before her, but she is really one of the first people that everybody thinks of when they think of prominent women who champion librarians and equity for all. Cora Belpre is someone else who's a Puerto Rican-born woman who came to the United States, and she did a lot for children who spoke Spanish and made sure that they had equal access to libraries. Margaret A. Edwards, I know, Quincy, when you mentioned my bio, Margaret A. Edwards is someone who everyone in the library field, and I did learn about her when I was in library school. She's someone who's hugely influential to anyone who works with teens. Jella Lepman is a German-born educator and journalist. Carla Hayden, if you don't know, Carla Hayden was the first Black 17th Librarian of Congress who was as was I guess asked to be the Librarian of Congress in 2016 and had a 10-year term, but she was abruptly terminated by President Trump from her job this past May. Um, Lillian Miles is John Lewis's wife, and John Lewis, if you know, was someone who championed libraries. And then there's a few others like Nancy Pearl and Samuel Wilbert Tucker, who I hope to get to and talk a little bit about as well. I'll start with Carol Moore. This is a picture of what she looked like. She doesn't have her hair up in a bun, but she does kind of look like, what you typically think of a librarian. Um, but she is, those of us who work with children and who had any kind of training as a children's librarian, and you learn this because I did not learn this right away. She's the grand dame of children's services. She pioneered the efforts in the field of children's literature for publishing and librarianship, and she is considered one of the most influential people of the 20th century for U.S. librarianship. Um, she got a library degree from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. Um, and she did what nobody had done really before, or very few people had done before, and that was to actually establish a children's room at the library. Before this, children weren't considered an audience, and matter of fact, they were not even allowed into libraries unless they were older. I think adults didn't even think about, that the library was for them, and um, I think, during this time, it was that whole idea of children are seen and not heard, or I don't know. It was that time period where books for children were the instructional ones that were very moralistic, and I don't, I don't think adults who were running libraries even consider children as part of the clientele, which I think is really interesting because in this day and age, when you talk to someone and you say, you work in a library, I think it's one of the things that most people think about. They're like, oh yeah, I remember going to the library as a child. I remember, taking out books. I remember going to story time. But there was a time in this country when that didn't happen at all. Children were not allowed into libraries, especially those who weren't white. So when she was at the Pratt Institute Library, she was the first one who created a welcoming environment for children, and she actually thought of children as children and provided them with furniture that they could fit in there that was child size. And she created cozy nooks and story times and a lot more. And, I just think it's very interesting that it's something that we take for granted, but way back, in turn of the century, early 20th century, we children were not even really thought of as a part of the library. But the children, and she also, I think talked to children and tried to find out what they liked. She also organized and served as the first chair of what became known as the American Library Association's Association of Library Service to Children, which is still going strong, and it's one of the major divisions of the American Library Association. And most of us who are part of the American Library Association are members of that division, especially if we're children's librarian. And this is just a little bit about her that I actually saw recently from September 13th on Facebook from Maud Flower Librarian's Facebook post. Um, because and Carol Moore, I think is probably because of social media, because the internet just has so much more information that's so much easier to access. People are now more aware of some of these women. So I was really happy to see that she posted this on her Facebook post, talking about, what she did. And it's interesting that by 1913, a third of all New York Public Library books borrowed were children's books. That continues to be the case in most public libraries. The most books that are ever taken out are by kids. She also had a lot of influence with publishers, and believed that the kids should, have autonomy in choosing what they read, which certainly goes to something, that's happening today with book bans and censorship and um, having parents, decide for every child what other children should read. I'm sure that, Anne Carroll Moore also believed the parents had a say in it, but like today, I don't think she thought parents could um, make choices for all children. So we have to thank the librarians and the children's rooms that you see in libraries today. We have to thank her for it. And like anybody who's somewhat well known, they have been not only she's written a book, but also other people wrote books about her. And since my background is as an adult librarian is what I started off doing, and then I switched to teens, and then also I took classes in children's literature. So I just had to share the idea of the children's books, the picture books that are available about her for kids. Um, and the first one is Miss Moore Thought Otherwise. And it's very much a book that I think anyone in the New York City area, the kids there probably appreciate because it is about the New York Public Library and they all know about it. Um, she wrote her own children's book, Nicholas, a Manhattan Christmas Story, which was actually a Newbery Honor in 1925. And the image to the bottom um, is sort of an image from it. It does look very 1920s with that Art Deco illustration. It's really pretty. Um, Now she was also, as I said, she was very influential with publishers, even after she stopped working in the New York Public Library system. Um, and so she actually had a stamp that said not recommended for purchase by expert. And the New York Public Library at that point, they only chose books that, she recommended. And so Goodnight Moon, which I don't know about all of you, but I'm a little too old to have had it read to me as a child, but I certainly know about it. And I don't it was around obviously when I was a child, but for some reason I don't remember my mother reading it to me. But many children, in this day and age, have had it read to them, and everybody really loves it. So the idea that she didn't recommend it is really interesting. And I did not know this initially until a number of years ago, where I saw a post online somewhere. I think it was when Leonard Marcus wrote a book about Margaret Weiss Brown, and that's where he talked about how she said that her book was not purchased by the New York Public Library when it came out in the 40s. And it's because Anne Carroll Moore, she loved Beatrix Potter. She loved books that were sort of fairy tales and, uh, make believe and magical for kids. But she didn't, at that point, believe that children should be reading about things that were really happening in their lives, the realism that kids were experiencing. So Goodnight Moon, she didn't believe was suitable for the library. And in a number of years ago, maybe 2020, the New York Public Library put out a list of the top 10 books checked out of all time from their library. And and Goodnight Moon was not on that list simply because it was banned from the library all the way from the 40s to the 70s. I don't think they actually put it in their collection until like 1972. So it has a high circulation, but it's not quite up in the top 10 yet. All because of Anne Carroll Moore not wanting it for the collection. Um, and I think nowadays, we that's why libraries have enough staff in most cases. They're able to look at reviews from different people and not just see one review and then decide they're not going to purchase it because one person says they didn't like it. So they're definitely listening to more than one person to get more viewpoints. The next person I'm going to talk about is Paul Belpré. She This is a picture of her when she was older, but she was a storyteller, a Spanish-speaking librarian, a author, a puppeteer. She was, I think when you think about like children going to libraries and seeing story times and having puppets and other props used in story times, she's one of the first that did it. So we have to thank her for uh, just sharing the love of reading stories to kids and using puppets and things to really share the story with them. It's not just completely being read to. It's the puppets and everything really help enhance the stories. She was born in Puerto Rico and came to the United States, I think when she went to her sister's wedding in New York, and she ended up living in the Bronx for a little bit and then coming to the New York Public Library. And she was at the 150th 15th Street branch, and that's where there's a huge Spanish speaking community there. And so she realized that um, kids who speak Spanish were not being served. There weren't very many books for them. They did not have bilingual story times, and their culture and their history were not being talked about, and kids in the library, other kids who weren't Spanish speaking, didn't really know anything about them. So she started implementing programs based on holidays such as Three Kings Day, which not only shared the Spanish speaking kids' uh, ethnicity and culture with each other, but also with white kids and families who didn't know anything about it. So the Center for the Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, they have a lot of information about her, including all of her papers. There's a teaching guide, and then there's a documentary about her, which this is a trailer, but I'm going to go to the next screen. And then at the end, I'll let you know, Quincy, when you could show the video. Number of these authors, or rather well, they are authors, but number of these librarians have had awards named after them that are in existence today. And the Pour Belle Pré is one such award. And it was established in 1996, presented annually to a Latino writer and illustrator that with for a work that best portrays, affirms, and celebrates Latino cultural experience. Um, and it is also co-sponsored by the Association of Library Service to Children, which we have to thank Ann Carroll Moore for, and the Young Adult Library Services Association as well on their divisions of the American Library Association, and Reforma, which is the association to promote library and information services to Latinos and the Spanish speaking, which is an ALA affiliate. And the Pour Belle Pré Award has been given to a lot of newcomers. I would have to say that anyone who's Spanish speaking and has written a book or illustrated a book, um, they have a really good chance of winning it because they are always looking for like new writers and illustrators that can reach out to the Spanish uh, language and speaking community. And there is a mini documentary which is fascinating that was created on the 25th anniversary of the award. And if Quincy wants to bring it up, we're not going to show the whole thing. It's 11 minutes, but I thought I might show just a little bit of it so you can get a sense of who she was. Do I have to stop sharing for this?
Yeah, I think you do.
Okay. All right. We will do that.
Belpré fue una mujer puertorriqueña, una bibliotecaria, la primera mujer bibliotecaria hispana que trabajó en la Biblioteca Pública de Nueva York.
An author, storyteller, puppeteer, and advocate for children.
Pura Belpré
was a pioneer for the Latino community in East Harlem. She asked the library to have Spanish books introduced to the library catalog, which helped more Spanish speakers use the New York Public Library. I feel her presence mostly when I see the room is filled with children and families. I feel her presence when one person who hasn't visited the library starts to visit. They come in and they visit a second time and they're there a little longer. When they come back and they borrow more than just one book, her presence is there when people come in, when children meet after school, when parents schedule play days at the library. I believe that that's Buddha's spirit, making the library a community place where people feel comfortable and they feel safe and they want to come back.
En la Biblioteca Pública de Nueva York tenemos una colección que yo considero un tesoro de esas primeras ediciones o ediciones tempranas.
You can stop it now, Quincy. I just wanted to give people a little bit of a taste for what she was like. And the video goes on a lot longer to talk a lot more about her. Go back to my slides. So right when we stopped it, the librarian in the video was holding up the Perez and Martina, a Puerto Rican folktale. Poor Belpré was also an author, and she wrote that book. I think she wrote some other ones as well, but it is a Puerto Rican folktale, which I think was wonderful for 1932 for kids to actually get to know about Puerto Rican folktales from other places. And there have also, like others, there have been a number of picture books written about her, including Planting Stories, A Life of Librarian and Storyteller Paula Belpré, which also won I think that's a Geisel Award. Oh no, sorry, that's the Caldecott. Sorry, that's the Randolph Caldecott Award. That's what that silver sticker is. And then Porras Cincos, How Pura Belpré Reshaped Libraries with Her Stories, is also a recent book. I think that came out either 2024 or 2025, also about her. So Pura Belpré, it's funny that I forgot to mention that none of these women ever intended to become librarians. It's just sort of happened. But poor Belpré wanted to become a teacher, and Anne Carroll Moore wanted to become a lawyer because her father was a lawyer. But she, I think, also the time period, but I think it was something to do with finances that she just couldn't afford. They couldn't afford to send her to law school, and so. She sort of, fell into the working with children in libraries. Margaret A. Edwards is, if you noticed before, there's two awards the American Library Association gives out on her behalf or within her name. This is I like this picture because she's holding a book. They don't I don't know what year it is, but Margaret Edwards was uh, born in Texas, and apparently her family was very poor, and she learned to read by reading the calendars that they, like the advertising calendars that they would, give out for free. So she would read the descriptions of the advertising stuff on it to learn to read. I think the family only had a Bible, so that's all she had. She didn't have a lot of reading material. Um, as a child, like so many others. So that's one reason why she was so invested in making sure children had access to books. Um, and she was hired in 1932 to be a librarian's assistant at the Enoch Pratt Library in Baltimore. But she actually worked there and did not get her degree for a number of years. And I think that's very kind of typical even of today. There are a lot of library staff members who you just assume are librarians, but they're not. But they've worked in libraries long enough that they know their stuff or they're learning on the job. Um, but she was not the first. As I said, there were a couple other people before her, Mabel Williams and Jean Roos, who were very instrumental in realizing that young adults, and we're talking teens, were also a big part of the population, and there was nothing for them either. You know, the books were either for young kids or young children or adults, and there was no such thing as a young adult book or a teen book probably really until, like 50s and 60s. But Margaret Edwards recognized the fact that, teens wanted to read books about that age group. And there were books out there, but I don't know if all the libraries actually had them. So she started reading books that were geared more for teens to familiarize herself with the books for that age group. And she started building a collection of young adult titles at the Enoch Pratt Library. And by 1940, she had actually created a teen section in each of the library's branches. And the nice thing was that she actually talked to the teens who came into the library and asked them for their input. I mean, how revolutionary is that? Um, and that's what we do today. And when I started off in libraries, I was an adult librarian, and then the teen librarian at the public library I was working left, and they asked me to become a teen librarian. And like Margaret Edwards, I was like, I have not read a lot of teen books. Now, of course, this was, many years later, but I did the same thing. Everyone said, just start reading. And of course, there was a lot more teen books available to learn the literature and understand what really appealed to teens. But what she established back in the 30s and 40s is what we do today. And I just have to thank her because I loved being a teen librarian, and that's still what I read pretty much exclusively. Some adult books, but I mostly read teen books, and it's not just to review them. So she's pretty amazing. I think she did stuff that we don't even do today in terms of working in libraries. She established a regimen in which all of her assistants had to read 10 titles for books for the teenage, which still exists, but it's a slightly different name. And it was put together by the New York Public Library. And not only did she assign them to her assistants, but then they had to get together and talk about them, which this was sort of before like book clubs existed. And then she gave them additional 10 titles until she felt they were up to her standards. And it turns out that they had to read like 300 books. And she was tough. She would quiz them on them and talk about them with them. It kind of reminds me of I'm trying to remember what there was a bookstore that may not exist anymore. It wasn't, I don't know if it was Borders, but it might have been Borders. One of the bookstores that doesn't exist used to have a quiz for any staff member that they were hiring, and they would ask them all about books and, if they knew who wrote what. So that her regimen reminds me a little bit about what they're doing today. She also did book talks in schools, which is something that we do now, but I don't think back then anyone did that. She created a list of recommended books. She called them speaking books, and she allowed the students to ask questions and discuss titles from the list, which I think students are doing today. So, yeah, she was way before her time. And also, which I really love is, of course, we're talking the 30s. There was no such thing as a bookmobile back then. So she took an old vegetable cart and created a bookmobile, and she rode around Baltimore bringing books to people unable or unwilling to enter the library during the summer months. That is something that still exists today. And she instituted annual book fairs. And so, which is something that I think one of Scholastic books, got the idea from her. But she really reached out to teens because she knew that, they weren't being equitably served in public libraries, and they wanted to have their own books that appealed to them. So, and she also has an award named after her too, in fact. Um, the Margaret A. Edwards Award was established in 1988, and it honors an author for a body of his or her work, um, for a significant and lasting contribution to young adult literature. It's not necessarily an award that's given at the end of an author's life. It's usually um, the books have to have been out published at least 5 years before they can be considered as part of the award. And Walter Dean Myers was the first one to get this award. And people like Jacqueline Woodson and Lori House Anderson, they've all won it. And it's an award that, we still look forward to every year, hearing which author gets this award. The other award, which I forgot to put on here, there's the A stands for Alexander, and her friends called her Alex, and she didn't go by Margaret. So there's an award called the Alex Award, which is given to adult books with appeal to teens, and that's also something that's given out every year. Jella Lepman, she is someone I had never heard of before recently, actually. A book about her just appeared on my desk that a publisher sent. She is not a librarian. However, she is a German journalist, and she has a fascinating story. She actually was the first person to found the world's largest children's library called the International Youth Library in Munich, Germany. And there's a board that gives out the IBBY award, and it also sponsors the Hans Christian Andersen Award, and it's all because of her. And she's the one who created this. They have an International Children's Book Day, and they put together an honor list of recommended books for children um, that is published biannually. And these are mostly books that are in translation. They're books from other countries. So those of us who are librarians, we always look forward to this because they are books that we never, like some of us, we haven't heard of, or they just haven't gotten a lot of uh, play or publicity, and we don't know about them as much. So this is a great way of bringing them to the librarians and to the kids. There's also a United States board on books for young people, and that also we also come up with one as well. And I know librarians who've actually been on the committee that comes up with this list. And she has her own medal as well, which is given to individuals and institutions that have made lasting contributions to children's literature. And author Catherine Patterson, she received it in 2018, and she's the one who also wrote a book about Lepman. And this just came out, like I think in the spring. And it's all about how Jella Lepman grew up in Munich, and when the Nazis came to power, she had two teenage children, and she realized that they would have to escape because she worked for a newspaper, German newspaper, and um, once the Germans got a hold of it and started publishing or wanting them to publish propaganda, she realized that she had to leave. So she and her teenage children left, and they went to London. And she was there for a long time, um, and then somehow after the war, the United States military asked her to uh, help um, bring books to the German children who had nothing. Um, and they wanted to, show them that, books were something that they should be able to enjoy as well. So I don't know, they didn't really have any money for her. The military was like, they suggested this idea, but it was up to her to figure out how to make it happen. So she was just relentless, and she got Eleanor Roosevelt involved, and the Rockefeller Foundation, and they were able to start donating books from all over the world to create this library in Munich for children. And it sounds fascinating because basically the people in Germany, the adults, the administrators, they didn't want children to come into this library. They thought the children would steal the books. They thought they would be uh, like mischievous and they would destroy everything. But these were kids who, through no fault of their own, had were children of the war in Germany, German children, and they turned out to really be they loved the books and they took care of them. They couldn't check them out at the time, but they could go into the library and look at them. And she ended up creating art classes and music classes. And the library got so big that they had to move it to a castle. Still exists, but it's still in Munich. Um, so she really is just a fascinating person. And she also did story hours too. Um, and the kids, they were able to write their own plays and put them on. She even hosted a young people's UN at the time, because the UN, the national UN or the worldwide UN had what they call it, the rights of the child. And so she um, showed the rights of the child to the children in Germany or those coming to the library and had them make suggestions. But the national UN didn't follow through on any of those suggestions. She also wrote her own autobiography, A Bridge of Children's Books, but it was only available in German, I believe. So she's another person that I was just fascinated to hear about. Carla Hayden, as you all know, was the former Librarian of Congress. I had to put her in here because she was also, before she became the Librarian of Congress, she was the CEO of the Enoch Pratt Public Library in Baltimore, where Margaret Edwards works. So there's this whole like connection between them all. And Hayden did a lot of great things at Library of Congress by really making the collections more accessible to the broader public. And a lot of the digital collections that anyone can access now is because of her championing them and trying to get funding for it. So I just wanted to include her. Um, and I also wanted to include Lillian Miles Lewis because John Lewis married a librarian. And, as we all know, he didn't have books as a child either and would read the Bible to chickens before he got into the civil rights and, got into politics. So that's a picture of his wife, the librarian, as well as their son, John, who is a hip hop artist. And she's mentioned, maybe not as much as she should be, but she is mentioned in both these picture books about John Lewis. And because John Lewis, I have to say, when I was thinking about, people not having access to the library, he was, I think, one of the ones who really pushed, getting the library open to anyone. And a few others, Nancy Pearl. You may all know of Nancy Pearl. She's a Seattle librarian and author. She inspired an action figure. Yes, she was a shushing librarian, which some people took offense to this and said, "Oh my gosh, librarians, we shouldn't be shushing people. That's such a stereotype." Well, some of us just took it, we thought it was funny. And yeah, we definitely didn't dress like that when this thing came out. Her action figure came out in 2003, and I have one myself, and nobody wore. Most people did not wear clothes like that in 2003, so we knew it was all taken in good fun. She also has a picture book about her, a library girl. Um, so I just wanted to include her and someone that I just learned about recently. As a matter of fact, the picture book just came to the library yesterday. Samuel Wilbert Tucker. He was a black man who grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. Loved to read. He became a lawyer, but he actually organized a sit-in in the Alexandria Library in 1939. And this is one of the earliest sit-ins I even remember hearing about. He was protesting the right to read because he couldn't access the library, being Black. And the sit-in got a lot of publicity, but they did not create they did not allow them in. They created a separate but equal library nearby, which was just for African Americans, but had, less, the books were not as new and it was shabbier. So he never went into it. But we all know that finally, after many, many years, he and others succeeded in having libraries open to everyone who wanted to attend them. And the other thing I found fascinating about him was he became a lawyer, but he never went to law school. He just taught himself. Um, so this book, The Fight for the Right to Read, by New Jersey native Jeff Gottsfeld, it just came out. It is a picture book. So I hope kids will enjoy reading it and learning about someone that they didn't know about. And now, yes, are we doing good on time? I don't know if anyone has any questions. I can stop sharing if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. We do
There
have
we
one
go.
question, and folks, if you have any, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But our question is, was librarianship a female-dominated field in the early 20th century?
Yes, yes, it was. It's still that way, but it was. I think it's because, um, like Margaret Edwards, women, was very related to teaching and being, an educator. And so they did not necessarily have to have a degree at first to work in a library. Of course, later that changed. And, most of the directors and a lot of people did get degrees because there was classes and, universities were teaching library science, but that didn't exist. You know, until probably like the 30s, where there was actually a degree that you could get to be a librarian. And I think a lot of even now, you can learn on the job. So I this is being recorded, but let's just say that yeah, you learn a lot of the business part of it and statistics and managing part of it, but you can be a librarian without, you can do what a librarian does without necessarily getting their degree. And that's why we wish more people, especially those who spoke other languages, people in the community would start working in libraries. But it never paid very well and still doesn't. So that's another reason why it was sort of a women's profession.
Thank you, Sharon. This has been an awesome presentation. I've learned so much. Our Girls Leadership Council, Pura Belpre, did come up before, so it was awesome to see her again and learn a little bit more. And I will definitely watch that trailer all the way through. But if anybody doesn't have any other questions, I'll keep an eye on the Q&A as I kind of wrap us up here. But I thank everybody for joining us for Champions of Equality. Oh, we do have a question actually. Let's see. Let me see here. So we have Dr. Sarah Joslin. I'm going to allow you to speak for just a moment here.
Thank you so much for this program. I'm hoping that we will have access to it on the website, or it will be on YouTube somewhere, because I think it's a valuable thing. And of course, we want to make sure we have the diversity of books that we need for all of our young people. And I know that that is a big challenge. In Cherry Hill, we have like 50 different languages that are in the schools. But it is so important for kids to see themselves and people like themselves and to have the dreams. So I appreciate this presentation. My good friend, Barbara Brown, was a librarian in the Trenton schools, and I will be telling her about this program. She really will enjoy hearing about it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I
Thank you.
absolutely agree about the fact that we need to have books for kids about everything. And that's why I'm really happy that New Jersey did pass the Freedom to Read Act, which does allow librarians to purchase books and not get penalized or arrested or anything for purchasing books, diverse books for their collections.
Awesome. We do have another question here. Thank you for sharing this interesting story. Librarians play such a critical role in opening people's, including young people's, minds and worlds. With the recent increase in book banning and challenging of public access to books, what can we do to push back on these efforts and promote equitable access?
I think one thing is just to be aware of what's happening, and to support the staff in libraries, especially if it's a school and they have a school board meeting. They're always happy to have people show up at the meetings, not even necessarily to say something, although obviously speaking up is great, but just having a presence at some of these meetings. I know. I believe it was the public library. It wasn't the school library, but in Glen Rock, New Jersey, they had a book challenge, and word got out, and people told each other, show up for the school board meeting or the town meeting in this case. And enough people showed up. There was 100 people that showed up, and it was intimidating for those who were protesting the book. And it turned out that that was enough to have them kind of stop, the censorship. I think ended up allowing, they voted against either removing the book or moving it. So it just showing up and supporting, whether it's also writing a letter to the newspaper, or I think just letting other people know, because I think those of us in the book field and libraries, we're aware of these book challenges, but I don't think everybody is. I don't think communities at large understand that it's as big an issue as it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. So again, thank you everybody for joining us for Champions of Equality, Women Advancing Equity in Public Libraries. If you enjoyed today's program and would like to help us to continue to highlight important voices in the fight for equality, please consider donating at alicepaul.org. I also hope that you will all join us for our not so spooky Halloween celebration on October 11th at 12 p.m. at Paulsdale. That's 128 Hooten Road. All this information will be online and in an email that I will send to you. But at 1 o'clock, there will be a presentation by Carol Escorpizo on the history and traditions of tarot cards. Learn the basics of tarot, the meaning behind the cards, and about the people who shaped tarot. You can find more information about that in our upcoming programs on our website. Sharon is also going to share some information with me that I will email out to you all so you can find out more ways to get involved. Go visit the New Jersey State Library, get your library card if you haven't already. It's a perfect time to do so. It's never too late to get a library card. So yeah, thank you again, Sharon, for taking the time to tell us this interesting history. I'm so glad that we had this program tonight. And I thank you all for attending. So I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.